Mark Bishop Show. Truly like a box of chocolates. You never know who you're going to meet. From business, lifestyle, and fun. Here's Mark.
And welcome everybody to another Mark Bishop Show. Whether you live in the suburbs or the city, we all have wild animal neighbors. And we can sometimes unwittingly cause our furry and feathered friends far more trouble than they cause us. Everyday household trash like plastic bottles and empty jars can easily become death traps for unsuspecting raccoons, birds and squirrels, and even cats and dogs. While lethal methods of removing unwanted animal visitors from homes are cruel, dangerous, and ineffective. Now, fortunately, preventing needless animals from suffering is it's as easy as screwing lids on jars before recycling them and opting for humane deterrence. And these small changes can help make this planet a better place for everyone. So, Jacob Shaw, my guest on this episode, is manager of strategic initiatives for PETA. Jacob, welcome. Is it true that crushing cans can literally save wildlife?
Good morning, Mark. Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned, these open containers can quickly become deadly traps for hungry animals because what they'll do is they'll try to lick the last remaining food scraps out of the inside of a can or jar, and in the process, their heads can become stuck inside. We see this so much more often than people would imagine. Last month there was a raccoon whose head was stuck inside of a container in Omaha before a police officer actually helped him out and pulled the can off his head. And then this month in New York County, Pennsylvania, there was this really terrible case of a dog who had her head stuck in a plastic jar, who was severely dehydrated and malnourished and was saved by a local animal shelter. So, fortunately, we can all help prevent this from happening and really save animals' lives by just spending a few moments to crush cans and put the lids back on top of a jar or bottle before disposing of them.
So how can everyone properly dispose of trash to help sure that animals do get this safety, other than, doing what you just said? What else can be done?
So the other thing is really making sure that our trash is actually put inside of containers and is not just sort of like loosely piled up somewhere. In New York City, they for years have just been putting trash in a bag and throwing it out onto the streets. And then obviously, that's attracting animals there. But in the last year or so, there's been a real big push for trash containerization there, and they've seen, mouse and rat sightings just drop precipitously because they realize that when you actually put your trash in a container where animals can't get to it and it's not basically, an open buffet, it really does a lot to both clean up the city and make it better for the humans who live there, and, it doesn't attract animals in the same way. So it's a real win-win.
So, Jacob, what are the best ways then to deter mice and bugs and other animals from entering our homes?
So if we're looking for, a deterrent product to use, a lot of the time that's something that we already have in our kitchen. So we can use safe and natural substances like vinegar or cinnamon sticks to keep ants away, and peppermint oil or eucalyptus oil work really well as a deterrent for mice and rats. But whenever we're talking about these small animals, whether that's a mouse, a rat, or an insect, they really only enter our homes if food and shelter is available to them there. So it's really our responsibility to make sure that our homes are as uninviting as possible. So that just means making sure that food and trash are kept in chew-proof containers and that any entry points around our homes and apartments are sealed off.
I want to ask you about those sticky glue traps. I think we've all used them at one time or another. What's wrong with using those for mice and rats? Tell me.
Right. So, as you mentioned, many people have used glue traps, but most people after using them never use them again. And that's because these traps inflict unimaginable suffering on animals. They're responsible for more animal suffering than any other wildlife control product. And that's why PETA has been campaigning to ban glue traps and make sure that these are just a thing of the past. Because, for anyone who's unfamiliar, a glue trap is this small plastic tray that's coated with a sticky adhesive. And after an animal walks across the surface of the trap, whether that is a mouse, a rat, a bird, or even kittens or puppies, what happens is they get stuck to the glue and they are left to die a slow, excruciating death. Oftentimes their mouth and nostrils can become glued shut, and they suffocate to death, or the trap is thrown into the garbage while the animal stuck to the trap is still alive and they're crushed to death. And I know this is so hard to hear, but that's, just as hard as it is to hear, it is so much more horrendous for the animal to actually experience, obviously. It's the most painful and terrifying way to die. And that's why we're seeing countries around the world ban these traps. And in the last few years, we've made really great progress here in the U.S.
Right.
And we've seen cities like West Hollywood and Ojai ban them citywide.
So, I mean, it's sad, I know, but what attracts wildlife to our homes other than, garbage bins, food left open, that type of thing? How can we make our homes less inviting?
So one great thing to do is, if you suspect that there are open entry points that you might not be aware of, whenever it's dark outside, just walk around the perimeter of your home or apartment with a flashlight. And if light is getting inside somewhere, that means that there's some sort of opening where an animal could get inside, presumably. Mm-hmm. So, proactively finding those openings and sealing them up. And then in addition to food and trash, it could be the food we feed our companion animals. I have a dog, Louie, who I adore. But I make sure that, I'm not leaving food out for her overnight because, she's going to be sleeping. She's not going to eat it. Who's going to eat it? A mouse, a rat, or, ants who are going to come in because they think that it's being left out for them. And the other thing, too, is bird feeders. A lot of the time people don't realize if you have a bird feeder and you're throwing bird seed out into your lawn, it's not just birds who are going to come in and eat that. There are other animals, too.
Yeah. So, listeners, you can go to PETA.org, www.PETA.org, read a lot, because this fellow, Jacob Shaw, he is the manager of strategic initiatives for PETA. He's done a lot of terrific work. He was, in fact, his work led to the first ban on glue traps, which ensnare small animals indiscriminately and do cause prolonged suffering. And it was, as the introduction of both federal and state bills banning those cruel devices. But he's also helped secure the passage of groundbreaking ordinance in Ojai, California, banning the breeding of French bulldogs, if you remember that, and other breathing impaired dogs and cats who suffer from a lifetime of respiratory issues and other chronic ailments. Congrats to you, bud. You've done a lot of good work. I mean, how are things now in those areas? Big improvements, or are we heading back there?
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I would say that we are really, really moving in the right direction. I mean, there's that wonderful MLK quote that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, and that's certainly true with animals as well. I mean, I think once people learn how glue traps inflict such horrendous suffering on, these little mice and rats, pretty much everybody agrees that the right thing to do is to ban them. A lot of people don't realize, as you mentioned, that these French bulldogs and English bulldogs, as a result of being bred to have these extremely flat faces, they spend their lives struggling to breathe. But once people realize that the snorting sound that these dogs are making is a sign of respiratory distress, again, it's common sense to say, oh, why are we breeding these dogs to suffer? So that's why we're just always trying to keep animals, and their experiences front and center in people's minds, because there's lots of things that people don't agree on these days, but one thing that nearly all of us agree on is that animals are these wonderful beings whom we share the planet with, and there are so many great ways for us to help them, and it's on all of us to take advantage of them.
I totally agree with you, Jacob, and if I had my way, there'd be laws before you could just take a doggy home. There'd be all sorts of things, how to treat them. Don't leave them all day like that when you're at work. Don't put a massive big dog like a horse in a tiny apartment. When I see so much stuff, and I just don't believe it. Let's get a doggy, let's get a pussycat. And there's so many things to think of, because they're not just dogs. They're not just cats. They're people's children, aren't they? And they're, lovable things. So one last question. If any listener was to call a pest control company, what should they be aware of, just quickly?
Well, first off, I couldn't agree with you more about what you just mentioned, Mark. And thank you for using your show as such a great platform to remind people of all the ways we can be kind to animals. So, to your question about calling a wildlife control company, I mean, the most important thing to do is to make sure that anyone who's going to come help out is focused on the right goal, right? Which is that the only truly effective long-term solution to these issues is prevention and exclusion. So, look for a humane wildlife removal company, the key word there is humane, that safely relocates animals from your home or office or wherever it is, back to the wild. And obviously we want to make sure that these these companies are steering clear of traps, poisons, and other lethal methods, because we have decades and decades of evidence to show that they don't work to solve the problem. All they do is just inflict curable suffering on animals.
What a shame. Well, Jacob, thank you for taking time out. Folks, Jacob Shaw, he's the manager of strategic initiatives for people for the ethical treatment of animals. Wonderful place, PETA, P-E-T-A. And don't forget, www.peta.org, O-R-G, not .com, .org, okay? Thanks, Jacob. Have a great day.
Thanks for all that you do, Mark. Thank you.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Join us again for another episode of The Mark Bishop Show. It's a production of Mark Bishop Media.